Captain Midnight.
This video is brought to you by Skillshare, and contains spoilers. Godzilla movies can be a lot of things. They can be clear and powerful metaphors, like the original film. They can be fun and campy, like so many of the sequels. They can be confusing, great, or incredibly terrible. But one thing they should never be is just kind of boring. The new Godzilla isn't the first Godzilla movie to fall into this trap, but it's still pretty disappointing to see. You know, honestly, this review has been a lot harder to write than I expected for a few reasons. The first is that, cards on the table, I'm a pretty casual Godzilla viewer. Like many Americans, my first exposure to the character came from the 1998 movie, which I actually really liked when I was 7, along with Godzilla the series, which, if I remember right, aired on Fox Kids alongside reruns of Spider-Man. It wasn't until a few years later that a friend showed me some of the Toho stuff, like Godzilla 2000 and Godzilla against Mechagodzilla. I've gone on to watch more, like the classic original, and a few others here and there like Shin Godzilla, but I'm not going to claim to be any sort of expert. And this leaves me at a bit of a distance from some of the most hardcore fans, many of which will probably be in the comments of this video angry at the idea that I'm talking too much about the humans in a Godzilla movie. After all, no one shows up to these things to see the boring scientists and military characters. We just want to know how the monster stuff is. I've heard people say things like that over and over again with these movies, and I understand where they're coming from, but here's the thing. I can pretty confidently tell you that the majority of the movie is devoted to following the human characters. They get more screen time than any of the monsters, obviously, since they have the ability to actually, talk. So I have a hard time being told not to focus on the majority of the movie, which is about these human characters, the choices they make, and their reactions to the disaster around them, and just focus on the monster fights. I'm sorry, but I just don't think that's good film criticism. Now, the monster battles are an important element of the movie, and they're what gets people in the seats, but they're not the movie, and that's what I'm judging here, the film as a complete work. And I think what's so frustrating about this movie is that the human stuff is actually really close to working. It's got a very solid cast. Kyle Chandler and Vera Farmiga have been really good in the past. And I think the broad strokes of their story was actually really interesting. The idea of this couple who lost a son when Godzilla showed up in the last movie, now finding themselves on very different sides of this debate over what to do with the Titans now that they're popping up all over the world. I actually think that's a really good idea to build a monster movie around. It's not subtle, but a Godzilla movie doesn't have to be. The problem comes with the fact that the movie isn't really interested in this disagreement between the pair at all. Emma's assertion that the world would actually be better off with the Titans hinges around this idea that wherever they go, it kind of restores nature. That's a concept that the movie kind of brings up once and then completely drops. Probably because the idea of a monster who literally breathes radiation being good for the environment is, pretty goofy. But it doesn't matter at all, because Charles Dance's character that Emma is working with just isn't a character, really. He's introduced shooting a defenseless man in the head, and that's about all the characterization he's gonna get. I just rewatched the early seasons of Game of Thrones, and the level of nuance that actor is able to give Tywin Lannister is pretty incredible. But I really felt like he phoned it in here, and who could blame him? He's playing a character that should have had a very interesting and complex philosophy, but the script just doesn't dig into that at all. So he ends up making the bad guy in Thor: The Dark World look nuanced, and that's not great. But okay, let's finally talk about those monster fights. They're fine. I know some people weren't happy with the 2014 Godzilla, but honestly I think I preferred how that film handled the monsters. The big guy was treated with so much more wonder and awe. It almost felt like there was no way for one frame to even contain how enormous and imposing he was. That seems to be director Gareth Edwards' most obvious talent. In both that movie and Rogue One, he was great at taking old iconography like an AT-AT or Godzilla and making them feel scary, fresh, and massive. King of Monsters doesn't go with this approach. I don't think its battle sequences look bad, like some of them actually look pretty great. I love this version of Ghidorah, this massive three-headed ancient alien that really lives up to that description. I really liked how he looked in combat, with each of his three heads attacking in different ways. Pretty much every time he was on screen, I really perked up in my seat. But the cinematography itself sometimes doesn't seem like it really wants to commit to how big and over the top these creatures are. Nearly every battle scene is shot in the dark, often with lots of clouds, rain, or fog around. Sometimes that looks great, but I really wish they had changed things up in the third act and committed to a more vibrant color scheme. But overall, I thought the fights were done pretty well and I mostly enjoyed them. But, and here's where the entire internet gets mad at me, watching this movie kind of made me question if what was fun and unique about Godzilla has kind of quietly disappeared. The main draw of this series is seeing these monsters rampage through cities. What drew kids to it in the first place was the promise of that incredible spectacle. But when you look around, that's a huge part of blockbuster cinema for the past 20 years. We've seen cities, both real and fictional, destroyed in all kinds of ways. In films that take the concept seriously, and in movies that treat it like a fun roller coaster. We even have things like the Pacific Rim franchise, which uses a lot of the same tropes as King of the Monsters. It also shot most of its battles at night with like moody rain and fog, I think trying to make the fights look a little less campy. And even in stuff like the MCU, we see entire cities get leveled. But where does that leave Godzilla, especially when the rubber suit aesthetic of the franchise has been totally replaced by CG, the exact same technology that all these other movies use? I'm just not sure that the novelty of seeing cities knocked over by giant monsters is really all that novel anymore. And I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of people thought I was missing the point in saying that. Other movies may have a lot of destruction too, but only Godzilla films have classic monsters like Mothra, Mechagodzilla, and of course, the big guy himself. And they're right, these characters really are fun and unique, but I'm just not sure that's enough. Now, I didn't hate this movie, and I'm sure I'll see Godzilla vs. Kong when it comes out, but I think when the series moved to CG, in both America and Japan, it lost a lot of what was so charming about it. The costumes, the miniatures, it gave those movies a real texture that this one lacks. Modern audiences might reject that old school look now, like we expect highly detailed CG in our monster movies, and I think that can be okay too, but when I think of Godzilla, it's always this version that I'm thinking of, and I kinda prefer it that way.
We need bigger guns! Godzilla babies, hatchlings, action figures, and Supreme Godzilla each sold separately from Trendmaster.
Like I said, King of the Monsters isn't a terrible movie, and if you consider yourself a fan, absolutely go out and see it. But it lacks something like the powerful central theme of the first film. Like, it doesn't really have anything coherent to say about environmental concerns except like, us destroying the planet is bad, but letting giant monsters run rampant is, also bad. If they didn't want to go that more serious route, I wish they had at least embraced how crazy and campy the old movies can be, and just go all out weird. Maybe even lean into the humor with more jokes that are, like, actually funny. But instead, we're left with a very middle-of-the-road film with very middle-of-the-road ambitions. Not nearly as powerful as the original or even the 2014 film, but not as fun to watch as Godzilla vs. the Smog Monster or Godzilla 2000. It's just kind of there. I know this video might be a little controversial, and maybe you even wish that you had a platform to make your opinion known. Well, if you want to get something out there and get started in style, I highly recommend DIY filmmaking, creating pro videos with tools you already own on Skillshare. If you'd love to be a YouTuber that uses camera work and great editing to your advantage, this is exactly what you need. It teaches you how to shoot great footage, sure, but maybe even more importantly, it shows you how to do that with stuff you probably already own. So there's no need to break the bank just to get your channel off the ground. And of course, that's just the beginning of what Skillshare can offer to help grow your channel. There's a ton of great courses in animation, marketing, entrepreneurship, and way more, because Skillshare has over 25,000 courses to pick from. The first 500 people to click on the link in the description below will get 2 months of access to those classes absolutely free. So get started today and go to skl.sh/CaptainMidnight16. That's skl.sh/CaptainMidnight16.
Here's a special tip for the fellas and girls who have not already joined Captain Midnight's new 1940 Flight Patrol. You'd better hurry up and join at once, because there's a big adventure ahead. The thing to do now is to get started, because we're going to have not only barrels of fun, but loads of free gifts and prizes.